Welcome to the Great Ideas Diary, January 5th, 2006. I find the whole idea of a father of philosophy somewhat dubious, and not just because there have been plenty of women thinkers in the history of the world. The title traditionally goes to Thales, a 6th century BCE philosopher who lived in Miletus on the coast of Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. Aristotle's Metaphysics calls him the founder of the idea of first principles, him arguing that water is the basic substance out of everything else is made. But of course, at the same time as Thales was kicking around in Asia Minor, the Buddha in what we now call India also was spinning out far greater philosophies. Frankly, I would say that the birth of philosophy coincides with the very birth of humanity. That philosophy was born the very first time that a human had a meta-question, a question about a question. The first time that any human reflected on the world, or reflected on themselves or on life. To me, that was not only the birth of philosophy, but the birth of humanity. Nevertheless, in the Western world, Socrates seems an appropriate place to begin a series on the great ideas. And of all the places in Plato's writings where Socrates is mentioned, Plato's Apology, the Trial of Socrates, seems the best place to begin. There are several comments in Plato's Apology, Socrates' Trial, that seem worth mentioning. For example, at one time Socrates tells them that it is more important to obey God than men. I would not be surprised at all if Acts 4 has this very comment in view, when Peter and John tell the Sanhedrin the very same thing. But the two probably most important comments that Socrates makes in the Apology are, one, his comment that true wisdom is to realize how much you don't know, rather than how much you think you know. And secondly, that the unexamined life is not worth living. With regard to the first comment, surely this is true, that true wisdom is to realize how much you don't know, rather than how much you do know. I've known some very, very bright people in my life thus far, and many of them unfortunately know how bright they are. But surely, if they could hang around angels for a little while, or God, surely they would realize how stupid we all really are. And so I agree with Socrates' idea, even if he himself didn't always practice it, I don't think. The second comment, the unexamined life is not worth living, has some bearing to the outcome of his trial. Socrates was of course found guilty for corrupting the youth, for making the lesser appear the greater and the greater appear the worse, for speculating about things in the heavens above and those kinds of things. At one point Socrates says, "Perhaps you would be happy if I would simply promise to shut up and to stop asking important people questions." But for him, the unexamined life was truly not worth living. Having been found guilty, even though he actually could have escaped, chose rather to drink the hemlock voluntarily and die. Is the unexamined life not worth living? Well, I'm not sure that I would go that far. I think I would shut up and continue to live in Marion if the city magistrate said either shut up or die. But there is a sense in which a life in which we do not feel free to ask questions cannot ultimately be a very satisfying life. If we believe in God, then we would not fear to ask questions about God because we believe sincerely that the answers to those questions will turn out to simply reinforce what we already believe, or at least that what we believe would fit with the answers to those questions. I personally do not think that there are any questions that, if asked with a sincere attitude and with the seeking of truth, that there are any questions that are truly inappropriate. Some are unprofitable, of course. Will my car start today is not really a profitable question unless I have some reason to think that it might not, and I need to go somewhere. But in general, I feel a life in which we are free to ask questions is a much better life than a life in which we must simply force ourselves not to think. This has been the Great Ideas Diary, February 5th, 2006.